So I think what we do is take a little variation from our usual practice and allow for a couple questions right now so we can ask him a couple questions so before he leaves at 7 o'clock. So a couple questions for Jim. Anybody?
This is a shy audience.
Or John, you have a question?
Somebody, go ahead, Joan.
I have one. One of the things I'm going to be talking about is just the need for different levels of government support, what cities are doing, and also for lower levels of government to really push higher levels of government. So one aspect of the climate agreement that the mayors and all the cities have signed on to is to really push state and federal government to enact climate legislation, to tax carbon. How active have mayors been in advocating it? I mean, clearly, if we look at the fact that we don't have federal policy, you'd say not very, but is it for lack of trying, or have they really put themselves on the line in advocacy for policy at the state and federal level?
Well, certainly the mayors are not shy. I mean, you know, one of the great things about mayors is they love to tell the federal government what to do. And so they have used that bully pulpit in a number of different ways. Through the U.S. Conference of Mayors, they have pushed for climate legislation that addresses both on a big picture level, puts a price on carbon, but also ensures that sound investments will be made in cities that are growing, that need to grow, that are the most sustainable way of living with respect to the lowest carbon footprint. So the mayors have, and I was part of drafting some letters to Congress, to the President, to push for legislation that would put a price on carbon. I think the mayors have, I think initially saw from a political standpoint that a cap and trade was more likely, and so that was an area that they seemed to galvanize around. But I was with Mayor Bloomberg for his announcement in Seattle. I was speaking to the U.S. Conference of Mayors on Boston's efforts, and this was 2 years ago when Mayor Bloomberg came to Seattle and actually called for a carbon tax. So a little bit different than his counterparts across the country, but you know, as a business person, Bloomberg said, look, we just need a straight off tax. We need predictability in the marketplace. Let's put a price on carbon that's clear and predictable to the marketplace. At the state level, Mayor Menino has been working with Governor Patrick and the legislature. I have personally testified on all of the Green Communities Act legislation, the Global Warming Solutions Act legislation, and I serve on Governor Patrick's Global Warming Solutions Act Green Economy Subcommittee. Right now, in the coming month, there will be some recommendations made, or the Secretary of Environmental Affairs, Ian Bowles, who I was with earlier today, will be actually putting the target of what Massachusetts will strive for. So in Boston, we have embraced a 25% reduction by 2020. By December 31st of this year, Secretary Bowles has the legislative authority to set that target for Massachusetts at a range of 10% to 25%. The legislature put this range out there, and Secretary Bowles will have the ability to adopt that number. Given Governor Patrick's leadership on this issue, we certainly hope that he will adopt, as Boston has, a 25% reduction goal. Given his leadership to date, he's already gotten the state a significant way there. Given the landmark energy efficiency programs, the renewable portfolio standard approach, the solar investments that we've seen at the state level that have helped in Boston, we've increased solar installations, the installed capacity by 500% in 2 years. That's not just due to Boston's solar program, but the incentives that the state has put there. So I think we'll continue to use our bully pulpit, and certainly Mayor Menino is not shy on that front, or nor other mayors.
Great. What are your questions?
On the issue of land use, you were suggesting that we need to encourage density and minimize sprawl. What are some ways we might do that?
Well, there are various ways. I mean, certainly zoning is the most important way in zoning reform, and there's been various state legislative approvals done. Land protection is another way. And I serve on the board of directors of the MWRA. Today we move forward with further watershed protection out in western Massachusetts. think zoning is the key tool. Other tools that are not often utilized, but I think again, Governor Patrick and Secretary Bowles have done a good job of using the MEPA process, the state's environmental review process, to look at projects from a sprawl standpoint. I have, in my former role, I oversaw the state's MEPA program, and so I know what a powerful tool that can be. Secretary Bowles also has implemented for the first time a greenhouse gas policy that requires all projects going through MEPA to do a carbon assessment of those projects. And another area that Doug Foy in the previous administration that I served under did a nice job on is in infrastructure. The investments that the state and federal government make are so important to land use. The transportation investments, of course, new roads or even widening roads or repairing existing roads have an impact on development patterns. We know that. So we need to run those investments through the lens that the Office of Commonwealth Development laid out under Doug Foy's leadership of looking at those impacts as we're making those investments. Water and sewer infrastructure, similarly, we are engaged in that analysis down at the MWRA. Are investments in water and sewer going to induce a sprawl development pattern? And even today, as we look at energy infrastructure and where we make energy investments, I think can also, to some degree, have an impact. So we need to take that holistic approach where local communities working with the state are addressing those zoning and land use patterns. But with respect to the investments, we can't be making investment decisions that are inducing low density development use.
Thanks. Excellent.